So I think out of everyone up here, Adam, you've probably got the most contact with people sort of actually like engaged in the process of starting these companies. No?
Well, and they tell him everything. They tell me half of it.
Well,
so I said they tell him Ryan everything. They tell me half of it.
You have smart clients then. No, so I was just wondering, like, if what's really front of mind to you, or if you could wave a magic wand and change one thing or get clarity on one thing, what's your really top of mind issue in this space?
And we were talking about it before the panel. The question becomes: so the idea here is that because the way the token sale is promoted, that it puts into the minds of the buyers the idea that they're an investor and they're buying the token for a profit. That profit's going to come from the efforts of the team. And that's what satisfies what's called the Howey test. That makes it an investment contract, and all investment contracts are securities. And that brings it under the jurisdiction of the SEC. Okay. At some point, a lot of tokens are intended as software. In some cases, they're sort of a payment software, right? They're a lot like a vending machine token that you put in and you get to hear your favorite song. I would say that the vast majority of token sales have those kinds of utility things. Some are intended more like the analogy I give is if it's 1960 and IBM was creating a new mainframe. And they said, you know what, instead of trying to get the money for this new mainframe out of profits or regular investors, we're going to sell punch cards that's going to work on this mainframe. We're going to sell 1 billion punch cards for 10 cents each. And then anybody that buys them will be able to use it on our new mainframe, which we've financed through this very creative 1960s hypothetical. At some point, even if we consider that the sale of those punch cards is an investment contract, at some point, those punch cards become just punch cards and are no longer securities. And that becomes a very interesting question. And trying to plan a token sale, even one under Reg A+, or even one under a Reg D exemption, the question becomes, when is it that that software is going to become just software again? Just like the whiskey barrels that were in the warehouse, even though you had a right to buy that whiskey, at some point it becomes regular whiskey that I suppose has the utility of drinking, right? And I'd say, we're going to all be dealing with this week and next month. That's probably top of mind. I'd love to. We're very interested in regulatory change. We're very curious about, federal preemption of different kinds. The idea of most exchanges that are dealing only in crypto are regulated under as a money services business federally. And then, unfortunately, under 49 states and I guess a couple of territories, under the money transmitter rules of those states, if they have them and if they apply. This is unlike any other country in the world, that amount of difficulty. And, you might be fine in this state and not this one, and you've got a whole bunch of states to consider. So they were talking during the hearings about an idea of federal preemption, which was actually also considered by Comptroller of Currency, which can create a new kind of bank. That's kind of debated about the ways that they can and can't. It's being litigated. Because I think most people see that, and it's not just cryptocurrency, it's payments in general, it's FinTech as a broad sector. There are, there's been a number of clients that outside of crypto, that I've taken them to the airport. Because in Europe they have a different regulatory scheme that's more predictable and less expensive to comply with, and that's to me the most awful. It reminds me of in the mid '90s. It was difficult. I represented the largest firewall company in the United States, and they couldn't compete with Europeans and people outside the United States because they weren't allowed to export strong cryptography. It was considered a munition. It was on the munitions list. Until that was changed after a lot of effort, it looked like we were going to be the runners-up. And I just don't want to see that happen with FinTech in the United States. I'd love, if I had a real magic wand, I'd love to see a comprehensive idea about how to make that wall-making the states happy. I don't have a lot of hope for it.